Poverty has been falling in Myanmar over the past 10 years, but 1 in 4 people still live below the poverty line, especially rural dwellers. The United Nations Development Programme provides assistance to many with programs on education, farming and prevention of diseases such as HIV. The administrator of the UNDP is Helen Clark, former Prime Minister of New Zealand. Helen Clark, thanks very much for your time.
Nice.
President Thein Sein said a few days ago that for Myanmar, poverty was more important, that is the resolution of it, than the wealth of the country. What about the argument, though, that the two go hand in glove, that you can't fix poverty unless you have more wealth?
Certainly Myanmar needs GDP growth, but it needs the kind of growth that will lift the people out of abject poverty. There's very high levels of extreme poverty here. Now, to date, we've seen a lot of the growth fueled by the extractive industries, but unless there's transparent regimes for taking the proceeds from that, putting it into domestic budgets, allocating it into the virtuous cycle of development, you're not going to get the poverty reduction that's sought. So I think the President's right to say he wants growth with poverty reduction.
And in terms of the international aid program here, for a long time, UNDP was not able to have direct involvement. You have been involved over the years since Cyclone Nargis in changing that. How much success have you had? How much more work is there to be done?
UNDP's been here for a very, very long time, but through the period of sanctions, we were under very strict instructions from our executive board not to communicate with the government. So we, in effect, were like a super NGO. We were a very large super NGO, but we couldn't start building the capacity of the state, the strength of local government, do all the sorts of things we would normally do in a country. Now we're off the leash. We have a new country program, and we can really align with the political, economic and governance modernisation agendas.
In terms of achieving that inclusive growth, how much of a problem for the international aid organisations and indeed for UNDP too are problems like religious violence and the treatment of ethnic minorities in this country? It is a significant domestic problem. How seriously does it hinder the goals that this country ought to be setting itself?
The new Myanmar must be inclusive of all the people who live within its borders, irrespective of ethnicity, irrespective of faith and religion. And that's going to be a challenge for the leaders going forward, to really have that inclusive society which recognises strength from diversity.
What about Barack Obama's dictum expressed here in Myanmar last year that you can't have reform without reconciliation, was the way he put it? To an outside observer, it seems that Myanmar is falling a little bit short of those goals at the moment.
This is such a complex transition, and you won't see progress on absolutely everything all at the same time. But I think the international community will continue to say, don't leave people out. Accept the Rohingya as your people.
The World Economic Forum is bringing business and government from around the world together here at a pretty high level. You're here. What are you hoping the meeting can achieve in terms of helping lift this country out of poverty?
In a sense, Myanmar has been the last piece in the ASEAN jigsaw. It's been in ASEAN. We've seen other countries really lifted by their participation in ASEAN. Myanmar is now in a position to leverage off the growth and development all around it, supported by ASEAN and partners. So I think this summit is really about the emergence, the recognition of what's happened in these waves of reform, and for people to get a fresh look at Myanmar. It's not the Myanmar we knew 2 years ago.
Is there a danger that the plight of ordinary citizens can be forgotten to a degree with the focus so firmly fixed on making Myanmar more attractive for investment, things like land grabs and so on and so forth?
So I think the kind of message UNDP brings, and why I agreed to be a co-chair, is this focus on human development, on inclusion, on diversifying sources of growth, on going for job-rich growth, on going for skills development. In other words, development has to be about people. If you have high GDP growth and nothing happens for the people living in extreme poverty, what have you achieved? So taking everybody forward has to be the message.
Helen Clark, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.